Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Welcome to Unless, the podcast, inspired by that Dr. Seuss quote from the Lorax that reminds us of the role we can each play in making the world a better place. Join Dr. Hema Lomax and her guests as they share incredible stories of being moved to decisive action and perseverance, leading to tangible impact at scale. This podcast is a production of Corporate Compliance Insights.
Take any big goal, and what we're trying to do is just break it down into its smallest steps, and things become obvious, like how you put one step ahead of the next.
Right.
And I think that that's what we're trying to do is, like, if you don't know, anything that we don't know seems like this massive task and this impossibility. But if you really unpack it, it's just a series of like very small steps. Mm-hmm. And I think the more that we're able to bring that mentality to them, the more that they realize, oh my God, we can go crush this. And that's what you need, because you are taking on the world.
That's Zach Posner, co-founder and managing partner of the LegalTech Fund, TLTF, an early-stage investment fund focused on technology companies transforming the world of law. Welcome back to Unless, the podcast, inspired by the idea that unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. I'm your host, Dr. Hema Lomax, and today we're exploring a space where justice, design, and innovation collide, and where real impact begins with bold ideas and a deep commitment to change. My guest is Zach Posner, co-founder of the LegalTech Fund, a first-of-its-kind venture fund that invests in the companies reshaping how people experience the law. His work is guided by one big question: how do we make legal services more accessible, more intuitive, and more human, especially for the millions who are priced out of the current system? Zach spends his days learning from founders and building companies that do more than generate returns. They drive change. He is unapologetic about his obsession with design. For him, gorgeous user experience isn't a luxury. It is the bridge to dignity, trust, and empowerment. So whether you're in law, tech, or just someone who believes in leveling the playing field, this episode is a look into what's possible when we combine innovation with intention. Zach, thank you so much for joining me today. Welcome to Unless, the podcast.
Emma, thank you so much for having us. First off, you had me with the construct of Unless. I am a huge Dr. Seuss fan. And in fact, that is a painting that he did when he lived right outside in La Jolla, California, looking at the Hotel del Coronado.
Wow.
He did that, and it was called I Dreamed I Was a Doorman at the Hotel Del. And so huge fan of Dr. Seuss.
I did not know that. We're going to need a close-up of that for the notes of this episode. That's amazing. And also, Hotel Coronado is one of my favorite places too. My husband's in the military, and I've been on the naval base a number of times right opposite there. So fantastic.
No, that's exactly what did it for me. I felt that is one of my favorite hotels in the world as well. And I remember walking through it a couple of times, and then I learned about this, and I'm like, all right, we gotta make something.
LegalTech Fund Summit, hopefully one day at the Hotel Coronado. There's a challenge for you.
Let's do it.
But listen, Zach, before we get into the LegalTech Fund, I want to talk to you about that and your incredible portfolio of justice-forward companies. Let's zoom out for a moment and ask you this question. When did you first realize that access to justice, something so fundamental, was being treated like a luxury?
So I think there's a couple different constructs. You introduced me, you use the concept of access to legal services and access to justice. And I think they're almost like two different levels on the spectrum. And I think that access to justice is this amazing construct, and it's really important, but it's almost not the thing that I think tech is going to help in a meaningful way. I think that other construct of access to legal services, that became pretty obvious years ago from my end. You think about everything that's in and around the legal. What is legal? It's a set of rules, a set of regulation, a set of codes. And I think that a construct that came into mind was this is all like a series of if-then statements. So there was this vision that said, how can this industry be so far behind on technology? Can it be driven in a place where human capital charges, for lots of interesting and good and fair reasons, lots of money on an hourly rate? And wow, there's an opportunity for technology here. So I probably started thinking about this stuff meaningfully in 2013 and 2014 for what could be. Then look, between that stage and 2023, thinking a lot about workflows and how technology can improve workflows. And if that happens properly, you can really increase access to legal services, which we can talk to in a second. And then we had the advent in late 22 of that first demo of ChatGPT.
Right.
That kind of elevated everything a whole nother step function and probably accelerated the work that we had visioned out. Like, we had a vision for this stuff, but it almost brought the vision into the future on a real-time basis.
I mean, such an exciting time. Now, look, let's pause. Let's underscore the point about these lawyers. I'm a lawyer, so I can say what I want right now about lawyers. But very expensive lawyers are sometimes in the past, right? We're not keeping up with technology. On one hand, I mean, I remember, the noise when email became a thing, and lawyers were like, oh, risk averse. We shouldn't be using email for our legal work, and that's one side. And then on the other side, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Zach, Westlaw and LexisNexis, this legal research was when we first started seeing the internet used for public searches, for searches of legal data. So we're at the forefront sometimes. We're also sometimes the people putting the brakes on the system. So what's your background there? What made you think about law? Tell me, maybe talk a little bit about how you came up, what you did before you started.
This is a journey. We were talking about a quote from Dr. Seuss and how you started the name of your podcast. There was a quote that Steve Jobs gave that he did a Stanford graduation speech. He said, you can't connect the dots when they're happening, but you look back and things become obvious. But at the time, things were far from obvious. So I related to this. I was an entrepreneur myself. I had a couple different startups. One of them was in K-12 education, and we were helping teachers manage all of the data in their classroom. And I fell in love with that construct because it was the first time I realized you can, kind of do well and do good at the same time. So kind of think about education and impact-oriented area. You can use data to improve outcomes. And that software had spread to about 12 million kids across the globe. We had an amazing team behind us, and McGraw-Hill ended up acquiring that company. But a light bulb went off and said, we had all these kids' data. And at the time, you had school districts, and none of them, this is all the stuff about your kids that you don't want on the internet, their social security number, their grades. And at the time, school districts didn't ask any questions to their vendors about how they were holding this data. So through kind of a construct of saying this is missing, let's go help schools manage their data. And what happened is we went to our law firm to form a second company to go do this. And the law firm said, forget about schools. We need this as a law firm. Like, we're starting to use third-party applications back in 13, 14, 15. If this data leaks out, that's our client's data that's all over the place. So kind of got to sit there and watch vendors. And this was a company that pivoted into serving law firms on their first day. And I got to watch vendors in and out of every top law firm. And I'm like, there's nobody covering this vertical from an investor perspective. And you would talk to these entrepreneurs, and the frustrations would just be like, nobody understands legal. They can't differentiate a contingency firm from a firm that bills by the hour. They don't understand the difference between a big firm, a small firm, et cetera. So that was kind of the spark that encouraged us to investigate further. I had spent the last several years, again, in education, thinking about how data can be used to improve outcomes. And I said, hey, this is a really interesting construct, because the more tech that comes into legal, at the end of the day, you're going to improve access to legal services. There's the justice construct, where we look at companies that help people expunge their criminal records if necessary in an automated way. But then there's also the stuff that helps big law firms. But let's say you go to a big law firm like I did to form a company, and they say that's a $10,000 expense. Well, that may be a barrier for a first-time entrepreneur to starting a company. But hey, if there's a lot of technology these big law firms can be using, and that brings the cost down significantly. So, everything we do, from the big firms to the small firms to helping consumers, we look at as improving access to legal services. And that was a very long answer to your question. I don't know if I even got it right.
No, that's perfect. I mean, I'm surprised and intrigued by the inspiration. I can see how you found a niche of something that was really needed in education. And as soon as you speak to the lawyers, they're like, oh, we want this too.
Can I tell you just a little story in education? Because I certainly missed some of these days. So our software was basically an online gradebook, and we teamed up with a professor at UCLA at the time. And he had done a lot of research about the power of a text message. And it turns out that if you simply send a text message to a parent on a weekly basis in their native language, and it says, here's your child's missing assignments, you can improve learning outcomes by directionally about 30%.
Right.
This is a text message that costs about 3 cents to send. And the answer is pretty simple, because if you think about a grade book, if you have a missing assignment, you have a 0. If you turn it in, and even if you turn it in late, you get a 50%. But think about the difference when you start averaging grades between adding in a 50% versus adding in a 0. So here we have something that literally, I think the first school district we did it in was LAUSD, and we said, hey, let's put this technology to work. It improved math scores. And we tracked all of this to like high school graduation rates. And we're like, wait a second, how can you have something that costs 3 cents? So like to be able to scale that type of thing to millions of kids was really what got me hooked on this do good and do well construct. And I think that we're seeing kind of, while people don't think of legal as an impact-oriented area, as an impact area, I think we have the potential to do more positive good in this vertical than almost any other vertical you can imagine by using data.
Yeah, I mean, look, breaking my heart. Of course, it has to be an impact area, right? It has to be. But to your point, sometimes we don't think of it because it's so much.
I say legal tech, and people think we're out there helping. No, like we think that, yeah, even if you're helping high net worth attorney, I mean, that is just an area where you're just bringing down the prices for the basic work.
Right.
And the funny part is nobody, a lot of people ask us, well, wait a second, isn't all this technology, isn't this like going against, where they can't bill for as many hours or things like that? And we've like found the exact opposite.
Right.
That the good attorneys, they don't want to bill for the lower level work.
Right. Well, I love that kind of abundance mindset that you've got there. And also just this idea, this activity that's built, it gets in the way of impact sometimes. Too much manual activity is inhibiting you from having the impact you want to have. We know we're having this conversation much more easily now with AI and emerging technologies, because we're talking about automating the things you don't want to do so you can get to the things you do. But I think you're right. Sometimes we get in our own way thinking we want the status quo. I think you're the exact opposite of that, Zach. I mean, you said it a couple of times, this idea of having impact and doing good. But why you? Tell me a bit about you personally, because not everyone sees a problem, even a simple problem, and says, we should fix this at scale. So tell me a bit more about you, Zach, and the man that decided he could be audacious enough to put impactful solutions into place and fund them.
Well, audacious enough. I mean, we'll see if it's successful. There's a long way, and look, the flip side is like we stand on the shoulders of giants, and that's our entrepreneurs that are doing the work. But for me, it's like I've always just basically said, why not?
I love that.
And when you think about big products, there are big problems. It's usually just a question like, can you break these into small execution steps and go and prove out a thesis and go get some work done? When I just kind of saw the opportunity and said, hey, if we can help these entrepreneurs, achieve their goals and live up to their full potential, like there'll be a role for us and there'll be a world that'll work. And we just started chipping away at that one step at a time. Yeah.
Well, there we go. So the masterclass of step one is believe you can, right? Find the problem.
That's it.
You can and leverage others. Like you said, leverage others. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going back to my alma mater. I went to Indiana University and I'm speaking there tomorrow night. And it's just it was just a very weird path as to how you get to where you're at. But, and it's, for me, it probably started out by saying the business school was something that people thought was very hard. And I just looked up and said, wow, I see a lot of people and I can do that. Let's go do that. Or I can start a company. Let's go start our first company. Let's go there. Why not? Is my question.
Why not is the best question. What if it all works out is another question I like to ask myself instead of all the inhibiting things you might say to yourself where you don't start. So great.
But the flip side of this is like, what if it doesn't? Like we live in the best country in the world where failure is rewarded for a lot of these entrepreneurs. Yeah. I've certainly come across some entrepreneurs that they don't all achieve their goals, and we just get more excited to back them in the future.
See, now you've got me to my second point. You see, I'm taking you naturally through the hero's journey here because there's this quest, but then there will be obstacles to your point. But I love it. You've already front loaded the message, I think, which is failure can be very rewarding in many ways. The attitude to failure can be everything. So talk to me a bit about that. Maybe even share some stories about challenges you had along the way once you decided to embark on this journey. What were the challenges that you came across? And maybe tell us about how you handled those.
Oh, I mean, yeah, the challenges are real and they're there every single day. I mean, the first thing we had to do is effectively take a category that nobody realized existed and go and kind of go raise capital round and go raise a fund and go convince, I'm guessing, around 75 investors that we were going to go do something special. And we probably had to talk to well north of 1,000 to get there. But from our end, we saw all the pieces of this space emerging, and we said that there's going to be a massive opportunity here. But no, I don't know. Like the challenges, I mean, you talk about failure, like we encourage our companies to be laser focused on whatever the vision is and almost like fail as fast as humanly possible. Because what that enables you to do is like, these entrepreneurs come to us, they have these good ideas, and nobody knows if they're on point or off point, but usually they're like hanging out around the right neighborhood. So like maybe idea one is not the perfect thing, but maybe they need to like iterate and move one notch over.
Right.
So we encourage people to fail as quickly as humanly possible and then fix it. A mentor of ours, had a construct of like fail fast and fix it. No, but that's what it is. You're just like trying to like point in a little bit different of a direction, because usually until you find that thing that clicks.
Well, there's that story, isn't there, of Thomas Edison, who, they say he fell 10,000 times, but he said, no, I didn't. I found 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb or whatever it was, right? So, yeah, I agree with you. And if you're going to have to go through 10,000, we better start fast. Now, you just gave us some odds. You said 75 investors, but you may have spoken to 1,000. So, we're not talking about 925 failures there. What did you learn from 925 conversations that didn't end up in the first investment?
Well, look, we encourage our entrepreneurs to do the same thing. These are usually intelligent people that you're working with, and they raise valid objections. So you think about those objections, you think about how every single conversation dictates your strategy, and it can encourage us to change a little bit here, a little bit there. And I think that it's, I don't know, most people that when you're raising capital, they've done something before in their career or in their life. And, we take a pretty humble approach, like we could learn from everybody.
Right.
And that's kind of how a lot of my opinions have been formed, by mentors, by conversations. To me, it's a gift to be able to have conversations with people and to be able to learn a little bit. And the way we think about it is like, you don't need to listen to everything. You don't need to do everything that somebody tells you, but you should certainly listen and filter it. And all of a sudden, when you hear some patterns, maybe that's a data point.
Yes, brilliant. Exactly. Take it as a gift. Take 1,000 perspectives if you need to and figure out the pattern. I love that. Yeah, connect the dots there. Brilliant. Now, look, I know, we haven't really talked about the LegalTech Fund too much. We talked about what you do for the investors there and what your approach is. But one theme, when I've heard you talk about the LegalTech Fund, one theme is the decision to prioritize the user experience. Now, this is one of the things that attracts me to what you do. I think it's so important to have a client destination and experience in mind when you build anything, when you build any service or any tech. And I know that you prioritize that. So tell us a bit about that decision to prioritize user experience in legal tech.
So that has only been increased over time. Like that there's only been a stronger emphasis on this over time. We're in the middle of this shift where the most important thing used to be like technical know-how. Mm-hmm. And I think that 10 years ago, every venture fund, all they wanted to do was back founders that understood technology like in a really meaningful way and could code and do all this stuff. And now with the advent of AI, you're seeing all of these tools that can accelerate the adoption of coding like so quickly that you shift to this like user experience bucket. And, and then with that user experience bucket, in this vertical, it's very hard to get people to change their habits. So you need an easy on-ramp, and seeing a beautiful product that looks and feels like a natural experience is just that. And so then you say, we're not deprioritizing technology. We're just making a bet that the tech is going to improve so much that if you spend all your cycles on the tech and it gets better in 2 months, right, then what if you just, versus spend it on the user experience and constantly be refreshing the underlying technology as new models come out, as new things come out, and you'll be in a good place. And really in this vertical, you're seeing lots of technologists attack it for the first time, engineers that are leaving Meta and Netflix and Google. But the only thing that really matters is distribution, because the tech is almost like this commodity now. So for us, the key to distribution is a spectacular user experience. And if you find some software and you love using the software, chances say you're going to stay with the software.
That's right. That's right. I mean, you want to make it easy for me to use as a customer, as an end user. You want me to make it intuitive. You want me to not be clunky, not be too many clicks, not be too much time. And really just, I always like to say, get me going where I need to go swiftly and safely. That's really what I need.
Yeah. And that's it. And what happens is the companies that can do that, like the biggest thing that we're looking for at some of these earlier stages is just what does engagement look like? Like it's not about revenue. It's about how engaged is the user. The more frequently that you log into the software, the more important that software is to your life.
Right.
So pick something. The question that I usually like to ask people, and sometimes it backfires on me, but what's your personal email? Do you use Gmail or Yahoo, or what do you use?
Yeah, I use Gmail.
How long have you had the Gmail account for directionally?
Maybe 10, 15 years, maybe longer.
How would you feel if I took that away from you?
Yeah, pry it from my dead hands.
That's what we're looking for. And that happens, in an industry when people are not necessarily the most tech fluent, like you need great user experiences.
Right. So Zach, you've made me think about something, because you're absolutely right. And I agree with you. And again, I'll take that bet with you any day. But you remind me now of some work that Professor BJ Fogg does at Stanford on the stickiness of social media and trying to make sure we get high engagement, probably for ad revenue, let's be fair. But there's some concepts there. We're not just trying to make the user addicted to the tech. What are we trying to do there when it comes to legal tech and legal services?
You're trying to make people's jobs easier.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
I mean that's all that you're trying to do. You're trying to for an attorney, you're trying to make them a thought partner in the business.
Yes.
If it's for corporate stuff, even for consumer stuff. And the more that you can, we think there's going to be basically pressure on what we call the leverage model, or, it's where you have one partner, 10 associates. It's easy to think of this stuff in a law firm model for a second.
Sure.
Where we think that pyramid is going to shrink.
Right.
Now, not calling for the end of attorneys, not calling for saying people's jobs are at risk. In fact, I would almost make a bet to say, the hourly rate will go up significantly, and people will be more content to pay those hourly rates because they're getting more of a partnership mentality and strategic partner. Now, so what that means is some of the legal work fades into the background. And that's where we think things are awesome. Like we think a lot about the advent of the ATM in the late 60s, early 70s. And when that happened, people said that's the end of bank branches. But what actually happened is the number of bank branches grew almost equivalently to the number of ATMs. Now, the roles of people in the bank branches changed.
Right.
So we think that type of wave, we're hoping comes through legal. And then on the corporate side as well, if software can help an end salesperson negotiate their own contract, is that legal tech or is that sales enablement?
Right, 100%.
But the important part is if the legal process fades into the background and now the legal team has all the data that they need structured in a perfect way,
No, I agree 100%. So whether you're a banker or a compliance professional like myself, a lawyer, you've got a lot of data and you want it to be decision useful for you, but also for the end user, right? Like you said, keep them moving forward without so much come back to me, check in with me. I mean, I laugh, but so many of the policies I've either written or read, internal corporate policies say, when in doubt, come to us, but it's all doubt.
Yeah.
And we're really not giving any decision useful information, to your point, to facilitate and enable the business person to keep moving forward. So I love that. I love this idea of a shift in mentality of enablement, facilitation, allowing people to self-serve, to your point, where it's doable. I mean, back to your school analogy, you made it very clear. It's a simple thing, a text message to a parent, but we're still not scaling that, right? It's a simple thing to allow a salesperson to do an NDA that's the same NDA without a lawyer, but still we put the friction in. So I love that. And we can be insecure that our jobs will go away, but I think they'll just, as you said, they'll change, and for the better. I mean, we really need to be leveraging our own talents, to your point. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are examples where, before our time, there were typewriter rooms where you'd send the draft of a document down, you'd mark it up, and then they would literally type it and it'd get FedEx to the other counterparty. So back then, my guess is on average, you had 2 to 3 turns of an agreement. Now you have Microsoft Word. And it's not like all those jobs went away. It's like now you may do 30 turns if they agree. So, but what you end up producing is a better end product.
That's right.
That protects everybody. And by the way, we can definitely talk about all the consumer stuff because like I get caught into some of the business applications, but like from our end, everything we do from a birth certificate to a will, like our entire life is governed by a legal doc. And how do you structure all that data? And what does that mean as well?
Yeah, and I definitely see that's, I know you call them legal services, but for me, that's also access to justice in many ways as well, right?
I mean, look, the software that we invested in a company called Solo, and what they do is they help people when they get sued by a debt collector. And they ask them a series of questions about their lawsuit. And it says, hey, here's a lot of data that you can use to prepare a response by yourself. We can connect you directly to an attorney. And for pennies, they can respond to a lawsuit, and most of them have good outcomes. But what they found is most of this data results in them saying, hey, do you have other debt that we can help you settle before it goes to lawsuit? And with a couple clicks of a button, people are settling debt for pennies, for a significant reduction.
Right.
And the debt collector wins, the people win, and there's no lawsuits and there's no garnishments and it's just a better world.
That's right. It's massive impact.
Because of this technology.
Yeah. No, you're right. It is a better world. I think we should change the title of this podcast to that, Investing in a Better World, because that's exactly what it is. And legal tech doesn't sound that sexy or cool, but you're right. Like it really does impact a lot of us. Like you said, whether it's a will or a debt or, I think we had a colleague on a panel we were on recently together at Legal Week that talked about how, rather than just applying for a loan, you could help make the decision as to whether you should be taking that loan, not just being forced to
here's
take
5 alternatives.
Right.
And here's exactly like we think. But again, all of this, everything that we're talking about, all truth data, all source data lives in that loan application, lives in that loan document. And we just say, hey, what happens when technology starts there? What can you do? Where can it go?
Yes.
Where can it permutate to?
And that, I'm going to want to underscore that, because what happens when we start with the end experience and the problem that's, constantly solvable, we just haven't put our energies towards it at scale. Yeah, love that. Okay, so you've given us a couple of examples of how you've had impact, but I'm going to ask you, are there any moments that you want to share with us that validated this journey that you put yourself on, where people, real people got help that wouldn't have otherwise got help? You've given us a couple of examples, but, any others that stand out to you?
So this is one thing that stinks about being on the investor side opposed on the operating side is you just have less impact. You just have less interaction with the end customers. So I mean, like when you talk about that company Solo and you're going to Google and you see like 1,300 5-star reviews saying, thank you so much. Like but just in general, I mean, the validating thing is watching these entrepreneurs like achieve their targets and just grow their businesses.
Yeah.
And it's just like, if we can be a little part of them reaching their full potential, it's like, to me, that's what it's all about. And that's the biggest impact. Like, how can we have 68 portfolio companies, and you can say, hey, if each one has the capacity to affect thousands, 10,000s, hundreds of thousands of people, if not more, you start multiplying that out and you get to a pretty big number.
Yeah, no, that's phenomenal. And look, I want to underscore both of those things. So firstly, just let's talk about Solo again. So you often hear stories in the news about how debts have just got out of hand, right? And people lose their homes. So there's real human impacts to not having services that Solo's provided. So I can see how that would be very rewarding for you to even be a small part of that journey for the debt public, as it were, the public. But let's focus on the entrepreneurs, because I love that you brought that up, because one of the things I think you do so well is you said it yourself, I'm going to just repeat it, allow them to pursue their potential. One of my other guests, David Meltzer, says happiness is the consistent, persistent, without quit pursuit of your potential. Right? Which I love. I love that quote. I love that phrase. Now, I think that's what I see in what you do. You're unlocking the circumstances for these entrepreneurs to pursue their potential, number one, and also get to the edge of possibility, right? So we roll our eyes a bit because some of the solutions are for basic problems that should have been solved a long time ago. But look, they're not possible until your entrepreneurs step in. So talk about the edge of possibility and what you look for in terms of pursuit of potential with your entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I mean, that is the full game. Every entrepreneur comes to these problems through a different way. Like George of Solo, I believe his car was affected by a lemon law type of thing. Okay. And he realized there's a whole cohort of cases that are under a certain dollar value that no attorney wants to help you with. Like, and the core of his clientele are being sued for directionally $1,000. There's no attorney in this country that wants to take on a client who's being sued for it because it's just too small dollars where it's really hard for them to put hours and hours into something and then charge $50 to the client. So like that was the unlock for George. But he came at it right after law school. He went to law school in Utah and he was part of an innovation program. And he said, we're going to help people here. But that being said, to the best of my knowledge, I don't believe he had ever run a business before. And there's lots of other aspects that come into these startups. You have to build a team. You have to raise capital. You have to do all of these things that people are uncertain about. And for every entrepreneur, it's something different. We have some people that were venture capitalists that jump in and say, we're going to run a company. Right. But that being said, they've never sold a customer before. They've never gotten in front of a customer. They've never signed a pilot agreement. So for us, I think that it's almost like, or the biggest thing for me was just basically making every mistake you humanly could as an operator, because I did that a few times. And it's just saying, if we can help to stop these entrepreneurs from banging their head against the wall.
Yes.
That's a weird goal, but that's what we think about quite frequently, because that means a lot. Like if you're at an early stage of a company, you should be transforming yourself every 2 weeks to 4 weeks.
Yes.
So if you're stuck on something and we can help you unlock that, and we're not going to get it right every time, but if we're like 70% right, and that's enough to nudge you to move forward a little bit, I'd prefer to take that 30% chance of being wrong, but move 2 weeks quicker than get stumbled upon this thing and just kind of stall.
What a fabulous place to sit though, Zach, where you're unlocking the potential of these bright entrepreneurs that are going to have impact at scale all over the place. I mean, that's just amazing that you are that intersection.
It's absolutely amazing. And I would say we're not we're trying to help them unlock, I'd almost say, the full potential.
Sure.
Like they're doing most of this legwork themselves, but it's it's great. I mean, the only downside is it's a really long feedback cycle. Like at the end of the day, these entrepreneurial journeys are 10 years for these, you know what I mean? And we're alongside, and we're not, we're not in the trenches day to day. And businesses go through like lots of ups, lots of downs. And it's, but I think it's the journey that I found to be most fulfilling when I was doing this as an entrepreneur. And I'm hoping that all of these entrepreneurs are doing it, and we're hoping to be able to just give them a little nudge in the right direction at times.
No, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. And look, what's that other quote about, overestimate what you can do in a year, but underestimate what you can do in 10 or something like that?
We live by that quote. That's been the quote around AI, all the stuff we're seeing with AI. We think we're just getting started, but and I think entrepreneurs don't realize it. Like we a lot of what we do is just encourage them to take a time out.
Yes.
Like look back and look at how far that they've come.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard when you're in the weeds to see these things.
Mm-hmm. And look, I see back to that concept of the hero's journey. I see that, the gentleman from Solo, what was his name? You said his
George.
George. Okay. So George from Solo, he was moved by his own personal pain, right? These superheroes, they have their origin stories, right?
Yep.
And then they're like, wait, where do I buy a cape? I'm on a mission, but I don't even know where to buy a cape. And so I think you're helping people that are really moved to action. Again, what this podcast was built for, right? People that are moved because they care about something deeply, and they are going to make a difference because they've stepped up into that role. And then they're like, hold on, I'm not a business person. I don't know what I'm doing. And that's what you come in. So how do you take them from that moment of pain into positional power and belief in themselves to, okay, here are the steps that will get you there as successfully as possible?
Again, take any big goal, and what we're trying to do is just break it down and do its smallest steps, and things become obvious, like how you put one step ahead of the next.
Right.
And I think that that's what we're trying to do is like, if you don't know, anything that we don't know seems like this massive task and this impossibility. But if you really unpack it, it's just a series of like very small steps. Mm-hmm. And I think the more that we're able to bring that mentality to them, the more that they realize, oh my God, we can go crush this. And that's what you need, because you are taking on the world.
Yes.
With these
yes. Companies. So you invest in a number of superheroes that are taking on the world. How do you get them together so they can leverage each other's energy and skills and experience?
So this has been the biggest thing that we've been working on. You've been to some of our summits before. That's one area, but that's much more of a community event. And one challenge that we have is it's actually really interesting. We say we're the LegalTech Fund, and most people think, oh, that's a tiny little vertical. Mm-hmm. And then you think about what we do, and we invest in software that sells into law firms for both the business of law and then the practice of law. Into corporates, when you think about like the GC's office, the legal operations office, and then into business units. And then you go into consumers and you think about SMBs and then all the way down to consumers. It's actually massive. So George from Solo, that's working on how you file, how people go into small claims or how people do things at the smallest level is very different than a company called Pattern Data that structures data from medical records in and around mass tort for both plaintiff firms, defense firms, and even special administrators and the U.S. Department of Justice. Mm-hmm. So what we're trying to do is like almost say now that with 68, we're almost like going thematically and saying, hey, here's 10 companies that are working specifically in litigation, specifically for this type of client. And let's get them together in a small group. Let's get an offsite. Let's have them spend a day or two together. And then let's go find some renowned experts, and maybe some of the largest buyers of technology. And let's bring them in for the second day. And let's all do activities to get to know each other, to get to understand the pain points. And we're really uniquely situated compared to almost any other fund in the world to be able to do this. And these add so much value to these companies. I mean, from the construct of letting them learn from each other, because they're all working with almost like the same customers and then folks on those. And then B, from the construct of letting them engage with their end users.
Yes.
And so that's the type of stuff that we are gravitating towards. Is how do you bring like-minded folks together? And anybody else in the world would say, oh, legal, put them over. Like, no, we're not like legal. We're like legal. Let's bring our consumer companies together and let's bring the consumer companies together that are helping in and around X.
Right.
And I think that there's just been an extraordinary amount of like knowledge share. And look, at the end of the day, we are trying to be as good of a steward to these companies as we humanly can. And that's, we just sit with a unique bird's eye view to be able to put these pieces together. And we're thrilled to do so.
Well, Zach, it's very thoughtful. It's the stuff that dreams are made of, that you create these communities, these mastermind groups, these, spaces for learning and learning moments and teachable moments for each other. You'd think they'd all be competing, but that's the thing. They just don't need to, do they? That's the point.
That's the funniest part is if you listen to any one of our 68 companies or all of our 68 companies and you listen to their end vision, you would think they all compete with everybody. The reality is, I don't think we've ever had a company go up against another company for some set of work. Mm-hmm. And that's a sign of a couple of things. Like one, this space is just so big that there is so much opportunity. I mean, every company in America needs to think about how they're going to manage their contracts and how they're going to interact with. So I don't even know the amount of companies there are, or when you think about software that sells into law firms, there's 500,000 law firms in the country. Mm-hmm. In the US alone, there's 500,000 of these.
Right.
So there's lots of room for lots of companies to do very well.
And look, even if we talk about a movement towards deregulation, I think we've talked about this, there's so much change in law, legislation, rulemaking. And I think I've heard you use the word moat. It's such an opportunity. It's not going to change. Even if rules get rolled back, people need to understand how that impacts their decisions. So tell me about the moat and what the opportunity is for these companies that you invest in the future of legal.
Well, the moat is, at the end of the day, every state has its own set of regulations in this country, its own set of laws. And so a lot of this by design, like politics aside. So you hear of, privacy. There's a lot of privacy laws moving through, but it's like in California, you have to treat data separately than you do in Virginia, than you do in Maryland. And I think there's like 21 states that have privacy laws. And my guess is they will all have them over time. Each one has different nuances. So if you want to work within that state, you need to understand the nuances. You need to build that into your software. And I'm not saying these are like great modes that should exist, but they do exist because of this.
Right.
And there are some that are even worse. We've learned through some of our work with companies that there's thousands of courts across this country, and they all have different mailing addresses opposed to physical addresses.
Right.
So if you are trying to respond on behalf of yourself to a court, like it's logical you would mail something to the address of the court, but it turns out, no, that mail will get rejected and that mailing won't go through. So there's lots of these different things these obstacles that our companies have had to go through.
Right.
And a lot of them are trying to like share some of these learnings back with the entire community and saying, hey, how do we do the equivalent of open source some of this stuff?
Right.
Because this is not where the barriers should be. But at the end of the day, lots of rules, lots of legislation, lots of things that make it hard, but we're definitely seeing all these companies kind of overcoming a lot of that stuff.
So much opportunity there. So listen, we want to go back to your consistent with that quick pursuit of your potential. What's next for you, Zach Posner? Not that you need to do anything else, you can take a break, but what's on your roadmap?
Look, I think it's just more of what we've been doing. Like we're excited to invest into more companies. We're excited to, on the fun side, we just want to find more entrepreneurs that want to change the world, and we want to help them achieve their full potential. On the summit side, we want to deepen the ties to the community. We want to build more ties to the community. And we think that the more that this community is evangelized, the stronger it's going to become and the better it's going to be, not only for us, but for this whole construct of access to legal services. And we just think we've barely started to scratch the surface on this stuff. So I don't think anything wild or new. I think it's just more. And I think there's just so much more we can do. And it's the hardest part about having 68 companies is like at any given stage, our whole team can just focus to help one company in perpetuity, in forever. So, we're just trying to build more tools, build more opportunities to help all these entrepreneurs.
And build a better world.
There you go.
How has this work changed you personally, Zach?
That, I'm working harder than I ever. Even more than I was as an entrepreneur. This space has been so behind that it's just been amazing to watch these entrepreneurs, to watch the entire space develop. I don't know how much it's necessarily changed me, but it's taking everything out of me right now.
Okay, I'm going to ask you another deep question. See how this one goes. What's your living legacy, Zach?
Oh, I don't know that at this stage, it's like I have realized this is where I want to be for the next phase and the rest of my career. And, I'm hoping the stories get told through the eyes of the entrepreneurs that we're able to do amazing things. And we were just a small piece to help them. But if we get that right and we can help them, that again, the impact this is impact at scale. Yeah. Like it's one thing to be an entrepreneur and you can drive tons of impact. It's another thing when you can empower 60 plus of these entrepreneurs. So that if their stories get told, that's my legacy. We're winning.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, as I said, this podcast is called Unless because of the quote, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. So thank you for everything you do, not just for your investment companies, but also for all of their clients and their customers. You are really making a massive impact. And I've been delighted to be part of your community. So thank you for that as well. Where can people find you if they want to follow you or learn more about the LegalTech Summit?
LegalTech.com.
LegalTech Fund. Yeah.
Easiest way to do it. And and we're out there everywhere. Find us on LinkedIn or one of those places.
Oh, well, we're so grateful to have you. Hopefully have you back again soon to hear more stories. But for now, thank you for joining Unless the podcast and sharing your stories.
And thank you for all the work that you do. This is pretty awesome.
You're very welcome. Take care.